Once upon a time, two boys grew up playing hockey in the village of Terrace, British Columbia. One of them went on to play in the National Hockey League. The other became a comedian. Now, one flies planes and coaches youth hockey. The other is still a comedian and owns newsstands. This is their podcast, Enjoying Orange Slices with Jeff and Ian.
Hello, Jeff. My name is Ian Bagg. The show is Enjoying Orange Slices. It's Wednesday morning, Wednesday afternoon, depending what time zone you're in. How you doing? How you doing, Jeff?
I'm good. I'm really good. We haven't talked a lot in the last week. You were at the mothership in Austin, Texas, and I was in the home of the latest F1 race. I actually spent the weekend in Vegas here, so that was good. Now we're ready to go. Now, you're just going to walk away.
I've had enough of your stories.
Who's that? Which one was that? Lou? Or?
That was Lou. That was Lou being a maniac. Hey, are you talking to Jeff? I better help out. That's what he said.
Did he start barking? I didn't hear him. Yeah, he usually starts chirping when we could talk, but yeah, it's good. So Thanksgiving in the States was good.
All right. I forgot about Thanksgiving. It's been so long since we talked.
Yeah. So yeah, it was good. Got together with a bunch of people, and then
did you have it at your guys' house, or did you guys have it?
No, Rod. But we had it. The Buskies had it. Rod and Deb had it this year. So yeah, it was good. Lots of people, about 15 people. So we caught up with some folks we hadn't seen in a while. So it was good.
That's awesome.
And we're just starting to get our schedule back to the way it used to be.
That's funny. Just getting back to normal. I'm honestly, I'm beat. I'm done traveling. I'm like got one more week going to Chicago this week, and I'm just like, yeah. So yeah, I'm just like, I don't know how pilots do it all the time. They must give you enough breaks in between or something.
Well, a lot of people out there probably travel for work, and it gets to a certain point that I think a certain point in the year, you got to catch your second wind, or you just had enough. And one of the things is if you travel a lot for work around the holidays, that's a little bit extra stress, right? That you don't normally add in there.
It's amateur hour.
Yeah, you get everybody that doesn't normally travel.
Oh my God.
It kind of reminds me of people like when they decide it's a nice day and they're going to go out and boat. They haven't done anything to their boat in over a year. They screw up the whole marina because they don't know what they're doing out there, right? Instead of going out on a Tuesday, they go out on a Saturday morning about 11 a.m. and just mess everything up. That's what holiday travel's like, right?
Totally. There's a website that I go to, or like a thing on, I think it's on TikTok, but it's called Florida Boat Launch. And it's just people launching their boats and losing their mind, and their trucks going too far in and stuff like that. Oh, it's so good. I love it.
Oh, yeah, I out in Lake Mead, because we lost so much water over the last bunch of years. You basically had to go halfway on the lake to drive your boat in. Well, some of these guys with these, some of these boats are 150, 200 grand now with their $100,000 pickup, and they're way out in the middle of the lake. You're basically dragging up the bottom, right? So you'd see people stuck out there, or trailers totally jackknifed, and it was like, oh man, that's not. That can't be a good day. But now the lake's...
That's not the way to start off your boating day.
You know what? If you ever want to go down and you just want to have a chuckle for an hour or two, go down to a boat launch in the summer and just sit down, have your coffee or whatever, have your lunch, and just watch people just lose their mind. So to tie it into holiday travel, that's where we're going with that. I don't know what it has to do with hockey, but
it's speaking of hockey, we do have a guest today. Jim Ralph is dropping by the show to say hello to us, give us a little update on the Toronto Maple Leafs, and tell us about his career. Jim is color for the Toronto Maple Leafs on the radio out in Toronto. I don't know if he went to Europe with them, but we'll find out. We'll ask him a couple questions. But he's been there for maybe, I'm going to say, at least 15 years doing color, and had a great, I think he was drafted by Chicago. We'll find out all about him.
Well, back when he played, there was probably only 6 teams. So you got him. He's one of my favorite guys to listen to on the radio because he does the play-by-play in Toronto. He's got a great voice. They're a great team, but he gets fired up. And Jim is just so low key. Jim actually reminds me a little bit of Stephen Wright. You
Yeah.
know, he's just kind of got that tone, and then he'll add something in there once in a while, and really dry. And he is a funny man. So he's done a great
Funny.
job. And I mean, we got some good questions for him today, or at least we think they're good questions.
We think they're good questions. I texted you the other night after Calgary played Vegas, and I said, Dan Villar was monster. He was so, that goaltender for Calgary was huge. Calgary making a turn, but also Edmonton kind of making a turn. Not with goaltending, but with scoring. And I didn't even think about it. If they can outscore their troubles, they might be able to win some games, but I don't know if it's enough down the stretch because they're still under 500, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. But I mean, we can start in Calgary. We don't talk about the Flames a whole bunch, but they do have a little bit of a goaltender conundrum in Calgary because you've got Dustin Wolf, who's been the best goalie. We talked about maybe a few weeks ago in the American League. He was the best goalie in junior. He's ready to play in the NHL. The problem for Dustin is he's only 6'1", or like he's a 6-foot guy, which is a tall person, but not for the NHL. They want guys that are 6'5". So
Vladar is like
Vladar
6'8", right?
Pardon me?
Vladar's like 6'8" or something like that, isn't he?
Yeah, Vladar is at least 6'5", I think, and he played unbelievable.
He's a monster of a man.
So Calgary's got, you know, it's the best of times and it's the worst of times. Calgary's starting to rise, but you know what? Do they rise enough to get themselves, like, can they look at that team in 2 months from now and say we're a contender? Like we can push this thing over the top, because if everything's going well in Calgary, their goaltending is elite and their top 5D are very good, and the other guys they can plug into the sixth spot are doing a great job for them. So, but the problem in Calgary is you've got 3 goalies, you can only play one, and you've got some defensemen who are unrestricted free agents. So going to be really interesting to see what they do, because there's a lot of pressure on them, just like there is in Edmonton. Those 2 teams are in the same province. Calgary's under the gun to kind of compete with Edmonton. So we'll see what they do. I don't know. I think they either add and try and sign these guys, or they have a fire sale at the deadline, and they got some really good players that they could move.
Great pieces.
So
yeah,
we'll see.
Also Calgary that night signed a goalie for the day, as Markstrom had the flu and could not make it to the bench. And it's funny that they had to sign a goalie because their AHL team is in Calgary. So they must have been on the road, right? And they must not have been able to get a backup there in time. But usually an E-Bug doesn't get to sit on the bench, but they had to sign this guy to sit on the bench because they didn't have a backup goaltender before the game.
Yeah.
And the best part was,
great point. You brought that up, because this kind of sucks for Dustin Wolf, because he lost out on a day of NHL pay for one. Plus, you would think he might be part of their future. You're kind of hoping he is. He's going to play somewhere for somebody. But you cannot call someone up after 5 p.m. local.
Is that what it was?
Yes. So there's a certain time that you can't call up anybody in your organization. So doesn't that seem rather odd that you can't call anybody up, but you can sign a guy off the street? Like, how does that make the game better?
There's some rules in the NHL that just don't make sense at all.
I don't know why. I'm not sure about that. That's an outdated rule, obviously, so they'll have to look at that. I'm sure that'll get changed. But Markstrom came to the building, I guess, the other night and said, "Hey, I'm sick as a dog, or I can't go." And so Vladar went in and played, and then the other guy who plays in the same city for them, their up and coming young guy, couldn't even get on the bench. They called a guy that, who knows what, emergency backup. I don't know what he does. I'm sure he's out with the Flames or the Wranglers, their AHL team, once in a while, but pretty weird.
Well,
pretty weird.
The funny, the best part was within the first 3 minutes, I don't know who it was, ended up in the net on Vladar, and it looked like Vladar may be hurt, and they pan to the bench, and backup goalies sit like that with their gear and all of a sudden he just went down a little further.
Yeah.
Because later it'd be a dream to go in, but not within the first 3 minutes of the game of a 0-0. Oh,
No.
that was great.
Maybe, with about 10 seconds left in a draw.
Yeah.
So it was Carrier ran over Vladar almost right at the start of the game. And then Vladar got taken out later by one of his own guys in the second period. But I'm sure they'll fix that rule. And then, Calgary looked pretty energetic. Like I thought they played a pretty solid game and defensively sound. Whereas up the street in Edmonton, they're scoring right, maybe not as sound defensively, but nobody's ever going to sit there and tell you the Edmonton Oilers are a defensive juggernaut. They're an entertaining, high octane team. And what's McDavid got? 12 points in his last 3 games.
Yeah.
So he went from like the 16th page of the scoring list. Then he went up to like 39th. Then he was 16th the next night. And after last night, he's in the top 10 now, but he seems to be getting his energy back. And
he kind of has one of those every year where he like sputters for a bit, right? And then he goes, but I don't think they've ever had it at the beginning of the year for the first month, right? So yeah.
Well, and the other thing is they talk so much about the Stanley Cup or bust, this or that. They got the cart in front of the horse up there. Now they're starting to get the horse back in front of the cart, or at least beside the cart in Edmonton. And away they go. Like I look at Vegas. Vegas went all the way last year. They're 3-5-3 in their last 11, kind of pedestrian, right? I mean, they haven't, but they're still kind of getting chipping away here and there. But people forget that the NHL regular season is a marathon. So that gives a team like Edmonton a chance to get back. You get a team like Vegas that kind of leveled, I think, a little bit of a hangover. But then you get to the playoffs, and that's the ultra marathon, right?
Right.
So it doesn't get any easier. And so you just don't want to put yourself behind the 8 ball like Edmonton did. But really, whether you're an Oiler fan or not, we talk about it all the time. You need to have your best players in the biggest moments, or at least part of the biggest moments of your league. And McDavid's the best player. So, creating a buzz, Edmonton getting back to where everyone expected them to be, it's important for the league too, not just the Edmonton Oilers.
It's interesting what you said about the regular season. Do you think there should be more of a celebration for winning the President's Trophy? It's such a such a non-celebrated thing. It's they won it. You know what I mean?
It's actually in some cases a detriment, right? Like Boston won it last year and they lost out in the first round. It's a good question. Like if you look at the Premiership, the Premier League, right? Probably the best soccer league in the world. Now we're branching off into soccer and all our expertise there, but with Liverpool, Man United, Chelsea, all these Arsenal, all these big clubs, Man City in the Premiership, you win the league, you're champions. Hey, like we're at the top.
Yeah.
Like there's no playoff, there's no chance of getting beat out. But it should be celebrated a bit more because in the NHL, you have 32 teams, 16 teams make the playoffs. Obviously, if you win the President's Trophy, you're one of those 16. But I don't know how you kind of Jimmy rig it, right? I don't know because
I think there's got to be a separation, more of a separation between the regular season and the playoffs. Maybe if there was a break, if there's more of a break,
right?
So if you gave, I think 2 weeks would be too much, but a week off, like it's got to be that. I think that's the only thing, because basically right now it's 3 days off and then it starts.
Right, but if you look at a team like Florida, right? They got on a roll in the second half of the season, and until he ran into Vegas in the finals, they were just kicking butt and taking names, right? And then I think they had some injuries and kind of maybe ran out of gas a bit, and played a team that was playing on an extremely high level as well. But that's a good, I don't know about taking, like, I think if you ask most players, maybe at least 3 days off, maybe 4 would be nice. But once you start getting near a week, people start worrying about rust, right? And they don't want that.
But 7 days is a real reset.
It is, but if you just won the President's Trophy, do you want to wait 7 days for the other team to put together their plan? Because it's a copycat league.
But
Like,
what about like you say, the team that sneaks in because they're on the roll now, their rolls got stopped. So it's the same, like kind of the same thing, right?
Well, I think if you want to, I think if you want to give someone a break, then in the first round, well, that's kind of tough too. But for the President's team, maybe they get an extra home game. Like, I mean, you can, like, I think Florida. What happened? Boston, did Boston go up 2-0 or Florida went in and won the first game? I can't remember, but you can take all the air out of the tire of 82 games in one game. The visiting team comes in and wins the first playoff game at home, and now you're all of a sudden you're the road team, like you're the underdog because the other team, has come in and beat you, and so your 82 games that you've built up. I think the best way to look at it, and it's probably a little bit more in other leagues like the NFL, for example, where they get a bye. So let's just say that you had a bye if you were the President's Trophy winner. So you'd have to bring, and maybe you got a bye if you were the President's Trophy or the Eastern Conference winner or the Western Conference winner. Then you would introduce 2 new teams in the playoffs. So you'd go from 16 to 18, and they could go and play a best out of 3, and then, or whatever, maybe they just play a 7-game series and you wait. Somehow you got to find a way to give them a leg up if they're going to go for 82 games and win it all. And I don't have the answer for that other than maybe an extra home game for them, like play
something, right? There's something that's, I think it's got to be worked out a little bit. I think it's too much of a long haul not to celebrate it, and I don't think it's celebrated right now.
Well,
hey, let's get to our guest.
Okay.
Let's get to our guest right now. We're going to be bringing in Jim Ralph, brought to you by headygear.com. Go to headygear.com, get yourself a bag. Carrie Ann is actually using the Heady Gear bag right now for all her schooling, going back and forth to do all her labs, and she's got that bag packed to about 50 pounds worth of stuff. They're strong bags. So get out there, get yourself a Heady Gear bag, maybe a nice little Christmas gift for somebody you know.
We might have to get her a patch. We'll get her an extra patch. Maybe we should get a name, just Cab on it.
We'll put Doctor on it.
Dr. Cab.
Our guest today was drafted by the Chicago Blackhawks, where he was known as the high left save. And he now does color for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Jim Ralph, the funniest guy in the NHL. How are you?
Well, for the longest time, I was the funniest guy not in the NHL. It's minor league career. I'm good, Bagg. Sharps, how are you guys doing?
Good. Thanks for coming on. Baggsy, we've been trying to get some people on for a really long time, but I don't think anybody longer than we've tried to get you on. I think you were like on the first
number one.
Yeah, you were number one, but it's taken a while to really end because you're working for that Toronto Maple Leafs organization. There's a lot of time and effort that goes into doing the broadcast with them. So we really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, and plus I have obligations. I go to the mall to sign autographs quite a bit, and it's really getting harder to get people to stop. I find the last few years.
Ralph, how did you end up with that job with the Toronto Maple Leafs?
Well, actually, I finished in '89. I think Sharps and I played against each other in the minors when he was in Adirondack. Mm-hmm. And then I actually started in television. There was a show called Rinkside that was on TSN, which was all in the American Hockey League. And from there, I got hired by Global Television and started doing Leaf games there and the OHL game of the week. But everything back then, it was even the Leaf games we did on Global was a 25-game package. So I left there and did 1 year in Ottawa where I hosted 25 games there. And then the radio offer came up in, I guess it was 97. And was actually better work because it was every game instead of just 25.
Just 25.
Yeah, so it was 87 or 97 when I started doing that.
What was it? What was with the 25 game package? Is that what they would sell to the people? So that's what you would get as
Well, that
well?
was in back then. That was before you had the major corporations, the all sports stations. So Global Television at the time did 25 games. I think Hockey Night in Canada did 40 some.
Oh, I see.
CHCH in Hamilton picked up some games as well. So I mean, back in the 90s, I don't think it was until 99 or 2000 that every game was televised. So that was,
Really?
that's once the two big companies got involved and took over the national and regional rights.
Oh, that's interesting. I had no idea that not every game was televised. I was in Seattle the other day with a guy that I'm going to say his name first, that Jeff and I grew up with, named Trevor Henry, and he played in Seattle, and he was telling me that they used to have, when he played junior there, they used to have the chicken wire in the corners. Did you ever play with any chicken wire?
No, I mean maybe in Sault Ste. Marie growing up, the first before we got the plexiglass, there was some
Yeah.
chicken there, but that's no, I played at such an elite level. I never had to do that.
Oh my God. Jeff, do you remember the chicken wire in
Yeah,
Seattle?
I mean, to add on to that, in Seattle, they had chicken wire, and then they had, like, I guess they didn't know what to do with a rubber strip, so they put it on the boards. So every time you hit the boards, your shoulder would grab the. I mean, there was no injuries with that, right? So you had chicken wire. The corners were basically square, and then they wrapped just where the top of the boards was. They had a rubber strip there, so it was unbelievable. And then Seattle is kind of known for having rowdy fans, and so back then it was crazy. I'm not sure how you found Climate Pledge to be, but yeah, it was pretty nuts. And I'm sure Ralphie can remember. He said Sault Ste. Marie and some of those other places where the people were pretty crazy too, right? So
Yeah. Well, I mean, I came from the Sioux, and I was drafted to play junior hockey in Ottawa. And every time I went back to the Sioux, I got booed. And like, honest to God, like when I played in Ottawa, if they had Ottawa players come in with a visiting team, everyone was cheered that he was an Ottawa kid. And when I went back to the Sioux, it got to the point where my grandmother wouldn't go to the games because she got so upset. And then we had a game that I said something to the press after the game, and that made it even worse. So it was
You held back.
it was a promotion where if the Greyhounds won, everyone got a free dinner at the old spaghetti factory in the Sioux. So we won, but I said after, it's too bad the Greyhounds didn't win. I said some of the fans might have choked to death on their free spaghetti dinner. And my grandmother never went back to a game after that. But I didn't initiate it. I reacted to it, and I can be critical of my reaction, but I didn't start it.
I love it. Were you known? Did you, as a kid, did you grow up being able to chirp pretty good like that?
Yeah, well, two brothers. I grew up with two brothers. So
Youngest?
What's that?
Were you the youngest?
Middle.
Middle. Oh, middle.
Oh yeah, yeah. So there were a lot of issues that are still there now, but yeah, that's where you learn to chirp and start throwing punches when you go up with two brothers in the Sioux. But it was yeah. I don't think it was anything that you ever worked at. There are sometimes you would say things that just came to your mind. With you kind of make a living doing it. I know, Baggs.
So I
now.
do, yeah.
But that's sometimes you regret something you said. Someone takes a shot at you, and then you respond with a haymaker when it was a jab.
Yeah.
You feel bad. And I remember one trainer, it was something about getting new equipment, and he came in the room and he said something like, "You're not getting anything." He says, "You don't stop anything anyway." And I said, "Well, your opinions count so much to me because I respect you so much for washing my underwear every game." And then right away I went like, "Oh, that was," and it just ended like it just made everything uncomfortable.
You must have dirty underwear the rest of the season.
yeah.
Well, thank God I never played.
Ralphie, how did it work that you ended up a goalie? Because you're the middle one. Usually the younger one,
He's the youngest.
The Flaherty family, our old friend Flats there in Winnipeg, he was the youngest, right? So he ended up having to play goal, which was the best thing ever because he went on to play pro. But how did you end up playing goal? Because you had a choice. You didn't have to play goal. You could have made the younger brother play. What attracted you to playing in the net?
Well, part of it was I grew up, and the very first team I was on as a 5-year-old was called Tom Thumb. We had New York Rangers sweaters, so I was a New York Ranger fan, and Eddie Jockman became my favorite player. And then I loved the mask with the goaltenders. And the next year we were the Leafs, and that's where Ronnie Francis and I started playing together all the way up through minor hockey. But I loved the masks. I loved the fact that if you didn't play a lot as a defenseman or forward, you had to wait your shifts, but goalies got to play the whole game. So it was a combination between being in for the entire game and being attracted to the masks. And eventually Bernie Perrant became my hero. And I'm all over these Facebook pages, vintage goalie masks and everything else, because that was really, as dumb as it sounds, I guess I went from wanting to be Batman as a kid to wanting to be a goaltender because of the masks.
That's funny. It is kind of like the Batman position, right?
Yeah,
he's normal when he sits on the bench, and then he's Batman, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah, with his ball
You're
hat.
always looking for Robin to help you out. 3-on-1.
that's the weak kid to play center.
But it was that was just part of the attraction was just and even you go back now and look at some of the cool masks, and everybody's pretty generic now. As great as the paint jobs are and the masks and everything now, everybody's pretty much the same. It's the same style. But back then,
same look.
That's how you could recognize goaltenders, by their masks.
Mm-hmm.
And, which one was a Greg Harrison, which one was an Ernie Higgins, and everybody had them down as to who made what and what era it was, and I always thought it was pretty cool.
Hey, did you ever take one in the face with that mask? One of those masks on, like
yeah, and I think the worst that happened was when I was playing junior and still wearing them. I got a two-hander across the. We were playing Oshawa, and in Sharps, you remember junior could get a little nuts, especially when it came to the playoffs and stuff. And I was down and covered the puck up, and somebody just gave me a two-hander across the bridge of the nose, and the pressure split my eyes open underneath. So it was more the stick than a puck that got me. But when you see the way the guys play now, and everybody butterflies and everybody goes down early, you could. I mean, it would be death to try to wear one of those now.
Yeah, for sure. So you talked about Ronnie Francis, and then Bernie Perrant was kind of your idol as looking up to a goalie Bernie was amazing. Who are some of the guys that you came up with, and who did you kind of try and pattern your game after? Because you were you caught with your right hand. Most of these guys in the league, there's only a few guys that catch with their right hand, right? So
yeah, there's even fewer now, Sharps, than I think there was, back in the 70s. It seems to be a rarity. Now, one of the things for me coming from the Sioux and going to Chicago, I mean, my first training camp with Tony Esposito, who was from the Sioux and left-handed. So, I mean, I'm the second best left-handed goalie from Sault Ste. Marie to ever play in Chicago system, which means a great deal to me. I mean, I've got it on a business card and everything. But for me to meet Tony Esposito, growing up in the Sioux, I was 10 during the 72 Canada Russia series. And then to watch Chicago in the Stanley Cup playoffs and, your first training camp. I remember it was at the Bismarck Hotel. We checked in and they posted the training camp teams. And I'm on a training camp team with Tony Esposito. And it was such a surreal moment. And Doug Wilson, of course, went on to be the general manager in San Jose. He's a former Ottawa junior, and he looked after me at training camp. And he said, a bunch of guys are going for a few beers the night before camp. Come with us. And Tony Esposito was at the bar. And I hear the guys talking about the training camp teams, and I hear Tony's, and I'm standing against the wall, just looking, because I recognize, the majority of the guys that I shouldn't be out with. And Tony Esposito turned around and said, "You think that's bad?" He said, "I got some guy named Ralph on my team." And I remember I felt like I shrunk to about 3 feet. But it turned out he was really good to me. Although the first time he really spoke to me, Keith Magnuson was the coach, and at the end of the first workout, Magnuson blew his whistle and he said, "Red defense and goalies 4 laps." And the first thing Tony Esposito ever said to me was, "We'll do 2 real big ones." So he'd get mad at me if I got too far ahead. But that was my first moment meeting Tony. But he was actually really good to me throughout my training camps there.
That's great. What goalie equipment from your first training camp to what you see now is the biggest change?
I'd have to go to the Hall of Fame to look at it, Baggs.
It's
the pads for sure. I mean, the shoulder pads are one thing. We used to get a lot of hits here, but when we got a new pair of pads, it used to take us 3 or 4 weeks to break them in because they're that hard leather, and you had to use them a lot in practice before you were comfortable in a game. Where now guys just take them out of the box and strap them on. They're a lot lighter. We used to use the straps under the pads, like to go under the skate, hold them down. Now you'll see guys, they basically just bounce above the skates. And so
I watched that last
thing. Yeah. So it's I can't think of another position in professional sports that has changed as much as goaltending in hockey.
How often do you think that those guys are going through pads, blockers, gloves? How many changes of equipment during a year? I mean, that's not to say they won't change out their gloves during a game because one set's on the dryer and the other set's, ready to go. But how often do they change out their gear?
Well, I mean, when you watch them play an outdoor game, or they'll have, vintage jersey night or whatever, they got pads for that.
Yeah.
I mean, you're guessing they're probably going through half a dozen, changes a year. But that's the amazing part. And the other thing was when they first started going to the cage and fiberglass mask combination that everybody wears now. I remember it used to be, especially if you were in the minors, it would take forever to get your mask. Like it had, and even if you wanted to paint it, it would take months. And now you got guys that get traded and they got a new paint job the next day, which probably baffles me as much as anything. You're going, because you remember back in the 70s, a guy get traded and he just paint his mask white or whatever colors. And now they've got murals on them from a team that picked them up 12 hours before. And that probably amazes me more than anything.
It is crazy. So what do you like? These goalies are also big now, and the butterfly and the rest of it. So the equipment's changed a lot. Do you think the goalies have gotten, way more athletic, or just way bigger, or a little combination of both? Like these guys are all monsters now, right? And
I wouldn't say more athletic Sharps from my era. I'd just say athletic. I think that's the biggest difference is
drop a word.
Everybody always said, "Oh, the guy that couldn't skate went in net, or the guy that was fat went in net," and that was the reason you became a goalie. And like now, everybody's ripped and everybody's flexible, and it's I think it went from the most dangerous position on the ice to probably the safest now, because of the equipment and everything. But yeah, the biggest difference is, they're athletes. They're not the guys sitting having a beer and a smoke in the back of the bus after a game, icing your shoulder and your knees. They're. I heard some of them actually go to the gym now.
So your first training camp, what happens? How does it end?
Well, back then, Baggs, and I think it was going into Gretzky's second year. That's why the draft was opened up to 18-year-olds. Denny Savard was the first round pick with Chicago that year, and we had to go back after a year. So I actually went to training camp and then went back and played 2 more years junior. But we weren't allowed to stay beyond that week. So that's the way we did it the first couple of years. But it was surreal once. Like I said, the training camps were one thing, but remember one of my first preseason games was against Montreal, and you're skating around a warm up and you see Guy Lafleur and Steve Shutt and Larry Robinson, and part of you is, I remember Murray Bannerman played the first half of that game, and I was sitting on the bench because it was preseason and we were splitting, and Louis Varga was the trainer, and I said, Louis, I don't think I belong here. And he says, kid, he said, the puck's the same size here as it is in junior. And I said, that might be true, but it's moving a little faster up here. And but that's what I remember about early on. And I don't think players are like that as much now, where I was a genuine fan of the game growing up. So to be on the ice with certain guys or see guys, you know, you knew everything about them, you know, what numbers they wore for different teams, and to be all of a sudden a part of that. And looking around going, wow, like this, we've come a long way since playing ball hockey on Eastwood Street in Sault Ste. Marie, you know, to this.
Don't you think you bring up a good point about today's player? Like back then, you know, you were worried about if I make a mistake, I'm not playing the rest of this game, or I could get pulled, but there's a really good chance they're sending me down. Now, I think one of the good things that I've seen in the NHL, or at least in pro, is these kids make mistakes, they throw them back out there again. I think there's been a real change in the way they've looked at developing these kids, maybe. But like, you know, we watch a lot of games. Obviously, Vegas here, we watch a lot. They've got these young D up playing right now because they got some injuries. And these kids are playing 16, 18 minutes a night. You know, back in the day, you might have got 7 or 8, maybe lucky if you got 10. Do you kind of see that same kind of trend from what back when we played, or what do you see as a big difference?
I think part of it is now in society, you don't want to hurt players' feelings by benching them. It's insensitive. So I think that's the big difference. I mean, funny stuff that comes out now. I mean, I mean, I had some clashes with coaches, and you'll hear now, you know, something will come out where a coach was berating somebody and was mean to them, and you're going, like, really? Like this is the line? Because there are a lot of guys that were, and Baggs, when we were in Detroit in August, somebody, I think it was Steve Ott, had the line, was talking about Thomas Holmstrom, and the story with Scotty Bowman was Holmstrom originally wore 15 until they traded, Wings traded for Dmitry Mironov, so Holmstrom had to go from 15, and then he took 85 or 95. Apology. And Scotty Bowman said, why did you take 95? Why didn't you take 98? And Holmstrom said, well, it was 95 that I came here, left Sweden to come to Detroit. Why would I take 98? And Scotty said, because that's the year you'll be going back. And you're going now, that would be considered, oh my God, isn't that mean? And that must have hurt his. I mean, there were a lot of things that, rightfully or wrongfully, I mean, it was a different time. So I think the players are different, but you know, so are
you know what's funny about that. You know what's funny about that, Ralphie, is everything basically that has happened in the world is built on spite. Like, so you need that kind of, you know, I mean, I somebody was telling me there's a show on right now about food, and all the food that was built on spite. Like somebody had a fight and then they went out and created Mars, you know, Mars bars, and then so the guy that created Oreos was shunned by his family, so he went and created Oreos, like those kind of things. So if everybody gets along, nothing gets better, everything stays at the same level. So we need those people that kind of drive you, you know.
Yeah, although I mean, if you're making 10 or 12 million a year, you know, you got to suck it up a little bit too.
Yeah.
Oh. I mean, we did it for 27.5 Bagg. So,
you know, it's funny. We had Dave Barr on, and yeah, he's pretty funny. So I was talking to one of our friends. We were watching the game last night, and I go, do you know Barzy? He goes, Barzy. He goes, yeah, Dave Barr. He says, the golfer. Not the player. And Barzy chirps me every chance he gets. I'm like, I can't wait to tell Barzy that one. The Canadian golfer, Dave Barr. But
yeah, well, and that's one thing you find, like whether it's to the broadcasting or playing in the minors or playing in junior, how closely everybody's connected. That it's, you know, 2 degrees of separation. I know, like Bruce Cassidy and I, when I blew my knee out, my 3rd year, Butch had gone through an injury, and we used to fly from Ottawa to Toronto to Chicago. We'd take a cab to the doctor's office. We'd get on a Cybex machine for 10 minutes, get back in a cab, go to the airport, and fly home. And so now, you know, Butch is coaching with in the NHL and wins the Stanley Cup. Gabby Boudreau, I played with a bunch of different places. It's sort of amazing how you crisscross with all these guys and you all end up meeting in the same area again later. So it's kind of a unique fraternity to be a part of.
Talking about those coaches and guys you played with, like Ronnie Francis went in to be a GM and on, did you see like Butchie or Boudreau? Did you see these guys that went on to stay in the game? Did you see that, or did some of the people catch you off guard?
Gabby, not a chance. I thought Bruce Boudreau would be a coach in the NA. I mean, I got along with Gabby great, but I mean, he was laid back. We were roommates one year at training camp in Chicago. I'll try to give you the Reader's Digest version, but it was a year after my knee injury, so I was about 5 or 6 pounds over still. Gabby might have been a little more than 5 or 6, and we had we checked in on a Saturday morning. The Bismarck the Bismarck, and Roger Nielsen was an assistant coach in Chicago. So Roger either had to do the 20-mile bike or the 7-mile run before training camp. And I hadn't been on a bike much, but I thought I'd do the bike. But anyway, we thought Gabby had a pack of M&Ms. And this was Saturday morning. We don't weigh until Sunday. So we said, we'll just ration the M&Ms until Sunday. So we'll hopefully get closer to making weight. Then we'll grab breakfast. We'll grab breakfast after weigh-ins and medicals, and then we'll go do the bike or the run. So we did that, and now we're done. We didn't drink anything. We just had about 9 like M&Ms each to try. I think I made weigh-in. Gabby was pretty close, but one of the machines in the testing screwed up, so we were late. So we had to go right to doing the bike or run, which was way out in the country outside Chicago. So now the problem is we've got to do this, but we haven't eaten in 48 hours. So we're dehydrated and anyway, we got through it. But I remember we went to an Italian restaurant with Daryl Sutter and a bunch of the older players. And Gabby and I must have had about 9 loaves of bread before we even ordered. But that was the stupidity of thinking if we only had M&Ms for 2 days, so we could make weigh-in. It's the testing is a little different.
I love it. I'm surprised you're not the strength and conditioning coach someplace. That's a great story though. Like that, I love the way hockey is now, but that kind of story to make a team isn't there anymore, and I kind of wish it was like that.
Well, and you know what, two Baggs and Sharps, we're kind of in a world driven by negative stories all the time, and one I tell, and I said it on the air once, and I had Toronto fans get mad at me for it, but it was I was at a golf tournament. Rick Bowness runs an event in the Maritimes called NHLers for Maritime Kids, which is to raise money for kids and families that can't afford the cost of playing hockey. And they brought in a mother and her 3 boys who benefited from the program the year before. And one of the items at the auction was when the All-Star game was in Nashville, and it was 2 tickets to the game in Nashville, and one night's hotel, but no airfare. And I was sitting with Rick Bowness, and Martian came over and he said, "Can I get 4 tickets to the All-Star game?" And they said, "Well, we can ask and we can try, but it doesn't include." He said, "I want to get it for the mother and her 3 boys." And they said, "Well, it doesn't include airfare." He said, "I'll cover the airfare and extra night's hotel, but just can you get me the tickets?" And they were able to do it. Now, there's a story nobody knows about. And it was hard, as much as the Leafs would play Boston in the playoffs and Marchand would be a pain. You see that kind of
right
generosity from someone. It changes how you feel about them. So, I mean, there are a lot of stories like that guys don't do things just to post on their social media page,
of course,
or have the team do it. And for Marchand, as much as you could get sour at him on the ice, you're going, this dude is pretty. And you see how emotional he was with Patrice Bergeron, with Colby Cave's widow when she visited. You can see the guy's got a heart of a lion.
Yeah, it's pretty great. Yeah, those stories need to be told, but at the same time, you kind of the guys that do it hiddenly, you like to see more, right? The guys that kind of put it
Yeah,
out there, you're like, yeah, yeah, right? So,
yeah,
but at the same time,
yeah. It's
so
not. It's different when it's not self-promotion.
Well,
absolutely,
I think another guy that goes back a little bit around our era, but just one of the greatest people I ever ran into in the game was another guy like that was Joe Sakic. He used to donate $100,000 a year anonymously to hospitals and in the Denver area, and he'd done it for like 10 or 15 years, and finally they're like, "Hey, just like Marshawn, like stepping up, didn't want any notoriety for it, just did it because it was the right thing to do or what he thought was the right thing to do." And there's another guy, like if you're going to pull for someone, people like that, it's hard to pull for Marshy on the ice sometimes because he's a little bit of a train wreck out there, but tells you what kind of person he is and why he's been so successful.
Yeah, Doug Gilmore did the same thing too, and still does, where he would go out and just buy Christmas gifts and go to different shelters and hand them out, and there was never anything in the paper about it. He was very involved with Children's Wish Foundation, which he said was probably the toughest thing he'd ever done because of so many relationships that he built and then ended up losing along the way. So yeah, there are guys like that that are. I think you look at them as being very noble. That it's about
absolutely.
what we're doing, not about getting known for it. And yeah, that's what you love to see.
Now, I love that story, and I know you don't want to talk about yourself, but I go to some of these events and we work together, and you go up and you're the funniest guy. The first time I was just like, who is this? Why do I not know more? Like when we first met, and you have your gig that you do during the year, but you do these events where you do stand up at them, and you do your own style. How did that happen? Like, how did you end up like making this happen? And I gotta be honest, Jeff knows, and the people don't know. Your son, you've created this son who is also a stand-up, who is very funny. Like, was there somebody
And
funny in your family?
you've helped my son a lot. You've helped us both a lot, which
Uh,
I appreciate. But I'd emceed a couple of weddings. One was Darren Pang's wedding. This was while we were still playing. Then I interviewed or emceed a guy named Marty Dahlman's wedding, who was my roommate on the road at Newmarket, who married Pat Morrison's daughter, who was a famous sportscaster in Canada.
mhm.
And they asked me to do it, but both times I did it, I hated it. I didn't like public speaking. I didn't like getting up. That evolved in I'll fast forward a little bit. The Leafs, my last year playing in the minors in Newmarket with the Newmarket Saints, they heard I emceed Marty's wedding, so they kind of goaded me into getting up at our luncheon, which I was a little sour about because, in all honesty, it's still not something I look at it as public speaking more than doing stand up. So a year later in the summer, the Leafs released me in August. My career is over, and then I get a call in September from the front office of the Leafs, a guy named Bob Stellick, who was in charge of the public relations for the Leafs, saying, "Could you call me as soon as possible?" Now, I thought they wanted me back as a player. I didn't know why the PR guy was calling to ask me, but I thought they want me back. So I called and he said, "Yeah, Ralph." He said, I was up in Newmarket last year when you got up at the Saints luncheon. He said, "I just want to know if you'd like to be the guest speaker at the Leaf luncheon this year." And I mean, I was sour. I was livid. Like they just released me a month before. Now they want me to speak at their luncheon. But I got some advice because, my grade 12 education didn't look like it was going to take me very far. But somebody just said, do it. There'll be a lot of media people there. It'll be good exposure. Just do it. And I didn't really have a routine. I always fooled around with impersonations of Foster Hewitt or Don Cherry or guys like that. And I set it up with Joe Bowen, who I've since worked with for the last 27 years. He emceed it, and he was going to just sort of set me up for these impressions. Well, I was at the Royal York Hotel, which is about a half an hour drive from where I am in downtown Toronto. And I had to be there for noon. This was back before MapQuest and GPS and everything. I wasn't sure I could find it, so I left like at 8:45. And at 9:30, I'm in the lobby of the Royal York Hotel early. But I was thinking because they had at our luncheon in Newmarket, there were like 75 people, including players at our big luncheon. So I was thinking the Leaf luncheon's probably got to be a couple of hundred people anyway. So I walk into the Canadian room of the Royal York Hotel, and it's set up for 1,100 people. And nobody's there yet, but right away I was thinking, like, what have I done? And it was just a sea of blue and white balloons on every table. And then I kept thinking, well, I know Frank Mahovlich is going to be there, and Johnny Bauer and Daryl Sittler, and they must all be speaking. So if I bomb, like, they're not going to be there to listen to me anyway. And then I picked up, and this is a very, very key moment in my life, Baggs, as to when you bring up stand-up. I picked up one of the programs off one of the tables, and I went through the program, and right in the middle of it, it said guest speaker, Jim Ralph, comedian. Now, I'm out of hockey for a month, and they never said that I played or that I was in their organization. And I remember, I remember thinking I could just leave. Like, what are they going to do? Cut me again? No, nothing. But I ended up staying, and because I was there early, I was into this room off to the side where the players would eventually come in, and we get piped out to the head table. But as we were going out, the bartender in this room, whom I'd gotten to know pretty well during the 2 hours that I was waiting, he says, "Are you the guest speaker this afternoon?" And I said, "Yeah." He says, "Man," he says, "really look forward to hearing you." He says, "John Candy was great last year." So that, I mean, I remember at that moment, Doug Carpenter was the coach at the time, and I just remember saying, I will never, ever do anything like this again. I will get through this day, and I'll never do anything like it again. And if you take me back to that exact moment right now and said, you don't have to do it if you don't want, I would have left. And that ended up changing my whole life, because Don Cherry was there. We ended up doing something for for a sports station afterwards. We were both talking, like each other at the same time. And from that one moment, it took off. But because they had that comedian, and it just scared the hell out of me, I said, I'm not a comedian. I'm an after dinner speaker, and that's it. So I have so much respect for what you do, Baggs, and what my son does. But that's why I've always said, no, that's not me, because the first time I was referred to as that, it scared the hell out of me. And I don't think of and I do think there are differences between, we've worked dinners together, and you've got to admit there's a difference between a stand-up crowd and a dinner.
It's a corporate thing, but I think from now on I will call myself an after dinner speaker.
Oh my God, that's so great. Like, I love the fact that you weren't mad. I love it that you weren't mad that it didn't say hockey player, that you were mad it said comedian instead of after dinner speaker. The after dinner speaker who only dedicated his whole life to hockey.
I mean, this was like a month later. It's like my career's over, and it's like
your gear isn't even dry yet.
In fact, I remember reading, it was in one of the Toronto papers, that I had retired to pursue a broadcasting career, and that's when I found out I was done. I went, oh, I guess I'm gonna have to read next week to see where I'm going.
So you do that, and you become friends with Cherry, right? And you end up doing the Grapevine a bunch of times.
Yeah, well, I did it once. That's when Don had his show that he taped out of Hamilton. Yeah, Don Cherry's Grapevine. And I had no business being on it. And one of the things, I mean, to this day, and Baggs, I'll go, when we did the roast in Detroit in 2019, and this is me still, but I remember you were sitting with Scotty Bowman, and he was telling you stories about Montreal, and you got up after one, you grabbed me, and you said, I'm sitting with Scotty Bowman, listening to stories about Ken Dryden and Guy Lafleur. What am I doing here? And I said to you, but I remember saying to you, Baggs, this is me, every one of these things I go to. As much as I can walk around and wink and wave, and inside you're going, I don't belong here. Like these, and the people I've met, from John Elway to Kareem Abdul-Jabbar to Kenny Stabler and Jim Boughton, like from other sports, Brooks Robinson. I mean, but if you would have told me in the Sioux that I'd just get to meet, like, forget being on a name-to-name basis, like with Bobby Hull, Gordie Howe, Bobby Orr, I mean, it would have blown you away. So as much as I can, nitpick about the title of comedian or after dinner speaker, it really has been like an incredible, stretch, to go through this and meet
Yeah.
people and try to act like you belong. Like even Bobby Orr, I've bugged him to sign posters and send it to friends of mine.
I wonder who those friends are.
Yeah. I wonder who they could be.
But by the way, speaking of not thinking you should be there and being a kid over the moon, both of us, when those posters showed up from Bobby Orr, just insane. So thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, no,
Yeah.
I mean, like we like Gretz and Bobby and I, like we have like a legends luncheon we meet at every couple months. And we go through, like, we do stuff for each other,
Yeah. Giving back to the community.
Yeah. No, he is.
I love it.
And there's another one with Bobby, how good he's been, whether it's to my family. I've got a brother that's been incredible in a cancer battle in the last few years. And Bobby will call him every couple of months just to see how he's doing. He sent him jerseys and everything. And what and the thing about Bobby is he understands his celebrity, but he uses it for good. Like he uses it to help people. And again, like a lot of times, he won't want you to talk about what he did privately, to help somebody out or show up for somebody. So, I mean, that's probably the one the most, that if I get a voicemail from Bobby Orr, like I save it on my phone, so I can play it for people. Like, guess who called? I mean, whether we'd be out for dinner or on a golf course together, I'd always catch myself looking at him going, "You're Bobby Orr." Like, it's like you're in that little kid stage, and the fact that he's probably, as hard as this is to believe, he's probably a better person off the ice than he ever was a player on the ice. He's that incredible. And like I said, so to meet all these guys, throughout your life, and you're sitting around talking about how many NBA titles you won or Super Bowl MVPs, and I'm going, "Now, Kalamazoo game in '84, that was me." As we're talking about our accomplishments.
I love it. Ralphie,
you were good. You were good in that game.
Well, actually, we lost 9-8, but I shut him out in the third service.
Oh, Ralphie, you are the best. I know we've taken up a lot of your time today. We appreciate you finally coming on and giving us a good talk. So, thank you so much for dropping by. And the Leafs games, I listen to them, and you make me laugh. I love when you guys fight about the penalties, when you guys, because Ralph will say, well, it's a give and take, if you do things, and Bowen's all over the place screaming and yelling. So like I said, it's funny because you think you can come up with the most brilliant points in the world talking about stats and everything else, and especially on whether people are listening on the radio or online, it's white noise. But then you say one stupid offhanded remark, and maybe go, yeah, I remember that one. That was, you wouldn't hear Dan Galloway saying that. Yeah. But it's Baggs, like we said, you've been great to my son Jesse, and now it is sort of funny. Do we have time to talk about how you and I Sure
met?
Yeah, let's
work Sharps. I don't know if, I'm sure Baggs talks about me all the time.
Yeah, but, actually, he does talk about you all the time, so this will be perfect. Everyone else can get to hear the story.
We first met, it would have been 2018 in St. Louis. They had a roast for Darren Pang, and we were brought in by the Blues alumni for that. And I remember talking to Baggs after, and he said, "Look, if I said my son's getting into comedy," and he said, "Well, here's my number. If there's anything I can do to help," he said, "Let me know." And of course, I don't know what to say. So this is in April of 2018. So 10 months go by, 11 months, and it's March of 2019, and Leafs are in Vancouver. And Corey Hirsch, who was a former goaltender that was doing what I do on Vancouver radio at the time, Corey Hirsch says to a buddy of mine's in town, he's a comedian, and I'm going to bring him up between periods. I'll introduce you. And I said, great. Well, it's Baggs. So we meet in St. Louis. the year before, now in Vancouver, and we were lucky enough to have the day off the next day and went and saw Baggs perform. And that's when we started talking more, and he ended up bringing my son to Buffalo to do a few sets for him there. And then we've kind of gone back and forth between, Baggs coming to Steve Ludzik roast up here and the ones in Detroit we've done. So but that's how it started, sort of as a fluke, and then it's been a long distance but a very rewarding friendship.
It is a great friendship. I love it. I love being able to harass you and say things. And your son works hard at what he does and loves it. And he clips up these every so often and sends them to us. So I'm sure he'll clip up a couple of his dad and send them out. So he's a good guy.
Well, I mean, when we were in LA and you set up our whole week out there and got him stage time at the Laugh Factory, it was like there's nothing I could do to top that. It was like, okay, I looked after the airfare and the hotel, but Baggs is the one that brought him home. So that's like I said, it's been phenomenal, and hopefully it's not another 4 years before we meet up again.
I'd love that. I will see you soon, bud. I appreciate you doing it. Jeff, any more questions before we let me take off?
One last question. We got to get you back on. Maybe we can get you on closer to playoffs in the spring, but the Leafs win the Stanley Cup if what has to happen?
Wow. Joseph Wall wins the Conn Smythe Trophy. And I mean that seriously. Whereas as much as you can talk about, I mean, the last runs the Leafs have gone on, it was Curtis Joseph, it was Eddie Belfour. And as much as you can talk about Matt Sundin or when they had Nieuwendyk or Alexander McGillney, those guys were the key to it. And not that you're saying every playoff collapse or every disappointment has been goaltending, but as we all know, even though we've seen it in recent times where, you think you can win a cup without having, a top goaltender, you still have to have the performance where he comes through at the right time. So with all the other noise around the top players and what they do, if you've got the goalie that, they can make the right save at the right time, I think he would be he'd have probably the statue would be up outside Scotiabank Arena by the end of Game 7 if they won it in the first round. But I think that'll be the key. As much as we talk about toughness and the skilled guys, not performing in the playoffs, I think it's going to be great goaltending that does it for them.
Write it down.
Awesome. Yeah,
That's
no,
awesome.
I'm glad we asked that. We got to get you back on closer to playoffs.
I'm just guessing. I don't know for sure.
Yeah. Well, we talk about general hockey here, and we're usually incorrect, so that fits in perfectly.
Yeah. If you're listening to this show to win money off us on a gambling spree, you're going to lose. So.
You might want to take this down by the end of December.
Right. That's funny. Love it. Anyways, Ralphie, thank you so much.
All right, Baggs boys. Sharps, great seeing you.
Thanks, bud. Appreciate it.
Fantastic talk with Jim Ralph there. So many stories. I didn't know you'd played against him.
Yeah.
You must have been really young.
Yeah, I think so. Let's see. I would have been 89, so 90. Yeah, probably early 20s, right around. Yeah, somewhere around there. So
quick question. Who did you go into a training camp that you were shocked, like that you fanboyed over?
My first training camp in Detroit, Ron Duguay struck out to me because, Ron Duguay was New York and, this good looking dude who was always, front and center with the Rangers. And then he came over to the Red Wings. But what stuck out with me with Ron was he was a steady stream beeline in between the trainer's office and back out. He was cutting all the padding out of his equipment.
Really?
That's one thing that stuck out.
And he didn't wear a helmet either, right?
No, he didn't wear a helmet. And then later on, I think he did. But then another guy was old Snepsy, Harold Sneps, because you've seen him with Vancouver. So I remember Snepsy in training camp. There were some other guys like Johnny Ogrodnik was a 50 goal scorer in Detroit, which was a really good guy. And, so just kind of remember him. But other than that, like Joey Koser, Probert, Gallant, Iserman, all those guys had just been coming in just in front of me. So obviously, I knew Joey from junior, and that you didn't go anywhere near him because he'd kill you, literally injure you. So every year I don't know how I did it, but I ended up on his team at training camp every year.
Mhm.
I was like, right on. Because if you went to take Joey out,
Right on.
if you went to take Joey out, step in front of him, he'd punch you in the back of the head. And ask me how I know, because I learned that when we played in the Western Hockey League and we did our Eastern swing with Kelowna. We played Saskatoon. And so I took this guy out, bang, I got punched in the back of the head. I'm like, what's up? And so the puck's still in our zone. Come around again, I take this guy out, bang, gets me in the back of the head again. I'm like, what is going on? Right? I'm 16 years old. And I go back to the bench, and my partner was Stu Wennis, and he goes, Stu was a great guy, him and his brother Jeff. And Stu goes, I go, who's that number 20? He goes, that's Joey Kosher. And he says, if you go near him, he's going to kill you, and I'm not coming to help. I'm like, understood. Yeah, Stewie told me right on the bench. He's like,
just let you know.
You,
Look, we're not
yeah.
both dying.
Yeah, and Stewie was a tough customer too. So, but yeah, I think just going back to guys that Ron Duguay, because you'd heard so much about him playing with the Rangers. He was in Detroit's camp, and then of course Glenn Hanlon was always one of my all-time favorites. Right, if you're a Vancouver Canuck fan, yeah, he was the best. And Steps, he was a great guy too. So obviously we grew up watching those guys play, and I'll never forget. And I'll leave it at this. Back in the day, because not all the games were on TV, the Canadians came in to Vancouver to play, and we were listening to it. I think it was on CKNW, and Jim Robson, my favorite play-by-play guy. And the whole first period was, he said two names, Lafleur and Hanlon. That's all it sounded like he said. And so, that's when Glennie came into the league, and he was really gave Vancouver a shot in the arm.
Stood on his head, yeah.
But other than that, yeah. So I'll think of some guys though, and get back to you. But we should do some shout outs. So I'll
do some shout outs. You do yours, and then I'll do mine.
Just staying in the theme. I mean, would love to shout out Jim Rolfe, right? Obviously coming on was great, but he brought up a name of a guy that I think is probably the most iconic guy I can ever think of in hockey, or at least some, and there's some big ones, but Bobby Orr, that's my shout out this week. Revolutionized the game, and someone I looked up to and still do to this day. So I'm going to shout out Bobby Orr this week, and I'll kick it over to you.
On to mine, we got some sad news out of Terrace, British Columbia this week. The Braid family, who's Braid Insurance from when we were growing up, also a lot to do with minor hockey. One of their sons had a son, and his name is Austin, and he had a long fight with cancer and has passed away this week. And so we send our love to the Braid family.